A housing crash will hurt the poor. Let's have a look. Good morning everyone, Florian.Heise here and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. I've got my morning stein of coffee and it's actually having a nice start to the day with rain, so you might hear it on the metal roof. It's one of the joys of living in a Queenslander and there's nothing I can really do about that. It'll be you can listen to me discuss the news and hear the rain dropping on the roof. A great start to your morning. And I thought we'd have a look at this article from news.com.au because it's discussing what the housing price crash that many are predicting, who it will hurt the most. And here they're suggesting it will be vulnerable Australians rather than wealthy landlords. Now, before we jump into this, could it be because, frankly, our government will throw everything at housing? More and more I think about it, the more it feels like the property sector is Australia's version of the US stock market. Sure, we have our own, but it's what everyone's in. Everyone's in property here. Everyone's property obsessed. We're property fanatics. Most of the wealth of our civilization is in our property. And there's kind of a cultural difference. Here we see our house as an investment. In the US, some people don't even think of their house as an investment. It's just a place to live. Most of the time it's a loss. So let's have a look at this. If property prices collapse as a result of the pandemic-induced economic crisis, vulnerable Australians will suffer, not wealthy landlords. But here's the thing. Here's one challenge I'll put to that. A lot of landlords aren't wealthy. A lot of landlords are trying to do negative gearing, interest-only properties one after the other to reduce their tax burden. And there's going to be some people that can't afford an interest rate hike, even though our rates are, well, I haven't even bothered updating the chart because they're so low. So we'll have to see, guys. We'll have to see. You know, if these mortgage holidays disappear, then we'll start getting forced sales. They may have to sell 1, 2, 3 properties. I'm still flabbergasted about the gentleman, the teacher, who had 6 investment properties that he was negative gearing. It seems crazy. You'd hope that, I mean, wouldn't you diversify your portfolio? Isn't that the one thing they teach you? You know, diversity. Diversity is strength when it comes to wealth growth. But then, you know, you got to go all in. Here's a question to you. Do we have a Wall Street's bets version of Australian property? I think that'd be good. It just doesn't move fast enough to be as exciting. So if the Australian housing market tanks as a result of the pandemic-induced economic crisis, it will worsen the inequalities that rising prices helped to fuel, experts have warned. And it really seems like you need to get on this property gravy train. It's that first hurdle for a lot of people. And hopefully, now that there's reductions in rent prices, it's going to be easier for people to save up and to put money aside. But then again, a viewer sent me a picture of using Afterpay to even pay for your medicine at the pharmacist, so maybe Australians won't learn, some of them. Increasingly dire forecasts from economists paint a picture of significant losses in the back end of 2020 as the consequence of the pandemic worsen and the government stimulus runs out. But rather than deliver relief for Aussies battling with high rents or locked out of markets due to the long-term boom in prices, a collapse in house prices will hurt. A trio of urban researchers say rising unemployment poses the biggest threat to housing market stability, with a major downturn likely unless the job rate recovers rapidly. And an example, here we've got the job ads data which was released yesterday. Now job ads crashed. They crashed and they were predicted to drop another 40%. Again, in this latest data, they actually grew by 0.5%. So, I guess, I wonder, I'd love to see if they could analyze. Now, viewers have asked for this. I have to look into it if they've got it. The comparison of job adverts for private sector to public sector. How many of those job ads are just placed to meet government requirements? But nevertheless, Job ads beat expectations. They anticipated another 40% fall. People are still advertising, everyone. Is this the bottom in job ads? So what will that tell us for unemployment? Because unemployment at the moment is sitting at 6.2 according to ABS. Underemployment is about 25% of the workforce. That's the big one. That's the one I really worry about, is the underemployment rate, everyone. I'm going to move this over a little bit, just so I get a little white space there. Those who benefited most from a boom are not those who pay the price when it busts, and those harmed by the boom are often even more vulnerable during the bust. Ian Weisel from the University of Melbourne, together with Lisa Ralston and Wendy Stone from the Swinburne University, wrote in an article for the Conversation. And I know I refer to this as Swinburne University in other videos, but hey, sorry if that's your alumni. Recent first home buyers are those likely to be hit hardest in the event of a market bust, they wrote. Well, yeah, yes. This is the thing. We've seen the phenomenon of negative gearing appearing. And in WA, the RBA was just warning of the increase in people in arrears. Look at the red there. That's 150 days late. 150 days, guys. Now we have the mortgage holidays. We've got the banks being touchy-feely and nice. So that's all been... It's all just been stepped back. Yet the banks, the stock market is flying up. Bank prices are shooting up. Yet they've set aside significant sums of money for losses. It's a clown world. It really is. So, we've estimated 24,000 households are at a very high risk because they took out large loans that might soon exceed their home value, and also work in sectors with high job losses. Another 135,200 are at risk, and 121,000 are at moderate risk. And here's the thing, if these people are forced into selling, if we're getting forced sales, you'll get people getting a bit hungry. They'll take offers that maybe they wouldn't have in other times. So there'll be edge cases that drive down the value of property. They'll drive down the value of property. It's always the last property that's sold in your street that affects your price, or sold in your area. Because that's all they're doing. They're just comparing to other sales. And any price relief for renters as a result of changing market conditions is likely to be very short-lived, they warned. Really? I wonder why. Many private renters hope a housing downturn will translate into lower rents and perhaps give them a chance to buy their first home in a more affordable market. However, in the longer run, the slowdown in housing construction will create supply shortages, leaving rental vacancies low and rents high. We are seeing more Airbnb and holiday rentals hit the market. So sure, we're going to have a slowdown in housing, but will that be offset by the increased, flipping of holiday or short-term rentals to the long-term market? Will the decrease in migration and potentially international students, will that also make it easier and cheaper to rent? There's the question. We'll have to wait and see. Many landlords, mostly mum and dad investors, have taken large loans to finance their property investment. They will need to keep rents high to hold on to their investment properties. Sure, but if they can't get anyone in... And here's the thing, here's the problem with this negative gearing, guys, where it creates this feedback loop. You have people argue, we need negative gearing to keep rents down. But there's a demand for investment properties as a way to mitigate the taxes we pay, so that pushes up the value of them, and then people have to increase their rent to pay the large loans that they're servicing on them. So, I understand the mechanism for it, but the problem is it's resulted now in this situation, coupled with all these other, grants and things, where we've got a huge bubble. We've got every incentive to get into this. There needs to be incentives to shift investment in our civilization from housing, which isn't that innovative, guys. Okay, and this is coming from an architect's perspective. When people innovative design. I've invested significant money in advanced technology. I was probably one of the first architects in Brisbane that bought a $40,000 laser scanner to allow us to capture data, to take advantage of the technology, and frankly, it's helped us a lot on jobs. But I've offered that service for years now to rent out. And I did all the spruiking to architects saying you could use this tech. And very rarely did they want to adopt it. Only now we're starting to see 5 years later where people are jumping on board. So, that's just one example how I think in many ways we're a bit of a Luddite industry. And just housing all the costs associated with it that aren't necessary. Like, we're building an extension on our house, and the environmental requirements, energy efficiency requirements of Section J requires we have all this installation in the house to get all these environmental benefits, to save money on air conditioning. I don't plan to put air conditioning in my house, but that doesn't mean I still don't have to put all this installation in, and it's going to cause quite a complex roof structure that we have to build, which will significantly increase the cost of a portion of the house, where it could have just been a few battens on the underside of a truss. We'll fix it to the top to make it look pretty. Now we've got all these layers of insulation and different things. We need to step in and step out and get air gaps. For what? For what? It'll take decades to pay back that additional cost. 50 years in some cases. It won't even be worth it. And if I don't get it, I'll be encouraged then to get an air conditioner to offset it. But there you go. It just shows you things with good intentions can have unknown consequences, and all these little costs add up to the cost of property, to the construction as well. That's why your foam box costs so much, everyone. And that's probably a very architects are very greenwashed, guys. They all think they're going to save the planet by putting extra insulation and natural sunlight into houses. They're a big bunch of hippies in this profession. Can you tell why I didn't get on with a lot of them? It might surprise you. I'm a little too cynical and skeptical. Anyway, the only good news for some renters is that lower prices might enable them to become homeowners after being locked out of the market during the boom. These households could benefit from a pandemic housing bust if the market then recovers. Even so, their gains will do little to change the overall trend of rising inequality, made worse by the housing downturn. And a downturn is not only likely, it's forecast to be sharp and sustained. So a grim outlook. The forecast for property prices in the coming year and beyond differs depending on who you ask. But all economists agree there will be declines across the board. CommSec, the financial advisory arm of the Commonwealth Bank, is expecting a 10 to 20% plunge over the coming 6 months due to flat economic activity and rising unemployment. On top of that, a collapse in foreign investment activity and international migration numbers will play a significant role, it said in its May report. Well, if we bring up here, this is from the Foreign Investment Review Board, and you can see that black line. That's building approvals for foreign investors. See that? How it lines up with the huge spike we had in 14-15 in construction. And I'll bring up a good quote. And this is from Matt Berry. And he wrote a piece years back about how our economy is built on a house of cards. And this one part I just want to pull from it and repeat for everyone. In 2016, 67% of Australia's GDP came from the cities of Sydney and Melbourne. And a small area from Sydney CBD to Macquarie Park, which had an apartment boom at the time, which lines up perfectly with that foreign investment, contributed 24% of the country's entire GDP growth for 2016. Just think about that. The growth in our entire GDP in that time, nearly a quarter of that came from that one area. So we have a housing boom. We've had it for some time. And here's another bit of economy. Oh, okay, nope, that's not working. Well, the Cantillon effect. Now, this is some old school economic theory. Essentially, where money supply or money is injected into economy, where it enters an economy, you will often get a bubble in that point. Housing is the point where money is injected in the economy here in Australia. Every time someone signs a mortgage, money is created from thin air. So you get a bubble there. So that's the Cantillon effect is happening there. So we've got a few things, a few issues with regards to housing here in Australia. So we've got CommBank saying a 10 to 20% plunge over the coming 6 months. On top of that, a collapse in foreign investment and international migration numbers will play a significant role. Oh, and another thing I'll bring up, migration. You can see here population growth large portion of it has not been from natural increases, it's been migration. On a per capita basis, our GDP growth has been below trend since the GFC because, well, we're growing, so our GDP is still growing, but per capita, it's not growing as fast, so we're not doing as well. The usual underlying demand pulse from net overseas migration has evaporated because the border is shut, the ComSec report said. New lending is expected to contract. Buyer expectations have adjusted downwards from exuberance to pessimism. Renters are likely to fall. Auction clearance rates are expected to remain weak, and turnover will be lower than usual. The net result means that price declines are inevitable. So we'll have to see. In April, UBS also forecast a 10% drop in house prices over the coming year, but warns the decline could be steeper without direct policy support. The analysis was released before the government announced its home builder stimulus scheme, although experts in recent days have said they don't believe it will have a significant impact on markets. NAB released its outlook at the end of April, saying the extent of a property market downturn would depend on Australia's economic recovery. Assuming a U-shaped recovery, its severe downside scenario expects a 20% drop in housing values in 2020, followed by 11% fall in 2021, before a modest recovery of 2.5% in 2022. That's not looking too good. We'll bring up here a chart just showing property price growth. So that's a pretty big hit, guys. That's going, if we had, say we take 20 points off this chart here for that first fall, you're getting down to 100 points. So that means essentially Melbourne would be back to 2016 prices. What do we have here? Sydney, Perth, what do we have? 20 points out here, so they'll be back to 2015 prices. Think about it like that. And then, so Melbourne's down here, we take, what, we're at 100, then we take 10% off, we're here. So then they're back to 2015 prices as well. And then Sydney, we're at, you know, what is it? 70 points, we take it down here, we get back. So they're saying essentially we'd get back to 2015 prices by 2021. And just think about that. Just think about that. Then, because you got to, but then it will go up 2.5%. But you remember, the hill climbing back up is a lot worse. It's 2.5% of those 2015 prices. And you know, let's just say, for argument's sake, 2.5%. We've gone down to 100 points. We'll just say, so it's easier. That means a 2.5% increase is only like that. Does that look impressive? It doesn't to me. It's probably just because I'm working through my first morning coffee. So, that recovery model factors in a lengthy recession. Australia officially entered recession last week after almost 3 decades of uninterrupted economic growth, as well as steadily rising unemployment. But if the economic recovery is V-shaped, a more rapid return of brighter conditions and an easing of unemployment, then the property outlook is less dire. In that scenario, NAB expects a 10% fall in prices this year before a reversal of fortunes in 2021 with a no. That's BS. It's not a reversal of fortunes. Come on, guys. Okay, here we go. We're sitting at 120. We take a 10% fall. That takes us 12 points down. So we're down here, roughly. That means we're back to 2017 prices. And then 2.5% of 2017 isn't a reversal of numbers, is it? We're just up a little bit. So no. But, you know, I guess people don't really look at charts, do they? The severe downside assumes that you get a very significant reduction. Hang on, just making sure. A very significant reduction in global GDP. Therefore, the demand for Australian goods and services offshore and exports would fall. That would clearly drive unemployment up, NAB Chief Risk Officer Sean Dooley said. You would have the potential impact on house prices as a result of that, as the economy really struggles. So big declines avoided so far. Well, yeah, because the government is throwing everything it can. We've got JobKeeper, we've got a boosted Job Seeker, we've got now stimulus for the housing sector. They're throwing everything they can at property, guys. In the month of May, all capital cities except Adelaide, Hobart and Canberra saw a modest decline in median dwelling prices, with the national combined measure falling for the first time since June last year, CoreLogic data said. And Tim Lawless, head of research at CoreLogic, is more upbeat in his midterm outlook for property. Considering the weak economic conditions associated with the pandemic, a fall of less than 0.5% in housing values over the month shows the market has remained resilient to a material correction. He said, well, it's been intervened. The market has been propped up. Unemployment hasn't filtered really through yet. With restrictive policies being progressively lifted or relaxed, the downwards trajectory of housing values could be milder than first expected. Across the capital's Melbourne, housing prices posted the largest fall over the month, down 0.9% in May, followed by 0.3% reduction in April. Values were also down in May in Perth, Sydney, Brisbane, Darwin, and rose in Adelaide, Hobart and Canberra. I'm feeling much more confident about market conditions than I was mid-March, but we're not out of the woods yet. That would be my summary. Well, I don't think, this is from Nerida Conisby, I don't think we've even entered the woods yet. Can we say we've had the full impact of this recession yet? It hasn't even hit home until all the support mechanisms are pulled away, until businesses are forced to stand on their own 2 feet without JobKeeper propping up their cash flow. We haven't entered the woods. And we can see now they're pulling it away from childcare. See how that goes. It comes back to the fact that this is not a financial crisis. Interest rates remain very low and the banks are lending. So if you have a job, you're in quite a good situation to buy. That's what's propping up the market. But economists are worried that the looming end of the government stimulus will have an impact on property prices. It's referred to as the September cliff, the point at which measures like JobKeeper and JobSeeker, rolled out to help Australians through the pandemic, will be wound up. The government has indicated it won't extend the programs past the point and is instead focusing on restarting the economy to get people back to work. Well, a good move would be to open the state borders. We need to open Queensland right now. Our tourism industry is in a lot of trouble. If you can have tens of thousands of people march the streets, you can open the bloody borders. I mean, come on. Am I the only one that sees his hypocrisy in that? September is also roughly the time that major banks will wrap up their mortgage repayment pause offered to Aussies impacted by the pandemic. Martin North, principal of research firm Digital Finance Analytics, believes mortgage stress will spike after September, putting further pressure on consumer spending and confidence. DFA's monthly survey found 37.5% of households were experiencing mortgage stress in May, Mr. North said. This means 1.4 million households are experiencing cash flow issues right now. Damn. Mr. North expects the number of households in mortgage stress to jump to 40.3% after the September cliff. So here's the thing, guys. Here's the thing. What if they pull every trick out of the bag to avoid the September cliff? And that's the question I put to you. What could they do? What ludicrous, insane thing could we think of that they could do to do it? Let me know in the comments. Another factor likely to contribute to market falls is the delayed hangover from the pandemic crisis. Dr. James Brugler and Jonathan Dark, economists from the University of Melbourne, said housing markets are slow to react to broad economic turmoil. Yeah. You can't flip a house. A house transaction isn't going to be as fast as the stock market, guys. Yeah. It takes time. It takes weeks. It takes months. House prices usually take longer to reflect what is happening elsewhere in the economy for a number of reasons, they wrote in the University Pursuit magazine. Essentially, houses are harder to buy and sell than stocks and bonds. Houses differ greatly from one to the next, and people value houses more than just investments. The pair modeled the short and mid-term outlook for property prices and believed across all capital cities a 4.4% fall in the June quarter, followed by a 2.3% drop in the September quarter, is likely. Sydney prices are predicted to fall by 4% in the June quarter and about 2.5% in the September quarter, they wrote. Falls in prices in Brisbane and Adelaide are tipped to be less severe, but in Melbourne and Perth, our models predict falls around 5.5 and 2.5% in June and September quarters, respectively. Improved household affordability is crucial in order to reduce social and economic inequalities and a downturn with lower house prices. But this coming downturn, when coupled with rising unemployment, will not deliver greater equality, especially if it's followed by yet another boom. Wrote Mr. Weasel, Ralston and Stone in The Conversation. Australia has flattened the curve of the pandemic to be successful in reducing inequality. We need to flatten the curve of both booms and busts in the housing market cycle. And only a thorough overhaul of national housing policy will achieve this. I'd argue reducing tax burdens on citizens would achieve this. Think about it. All these people struggling to save a deposit are paying huge amounts of tax. And how much of that is wasted? How much of that is frittered away? How much of that is paid on foreign aid and other programs while people are struggling to keep a home over their heads? I would still argue that for your owner-occupier home, you should be able to write off, claim all the interest expenses as a tax deduction. Because you should be paying for your home before you pay the state. What do you think about that one? As always, guys, let me know your thoughts and opinions. This is definitely going to be an interesting few months, and we'll have to wait and see what happens in September. Thanks for watching. If you're a fan of the channel, please like, share, and subscribe. If you want to support us that little bit extra, there are a few ways you can. You can join the channel on YouTube or Patreon. You can support us via our affiliate links at Amazon or eBay or Independent Reserve and Kucoin. You can buy our merch from HeiseSays. You can use Gold Pass from the Perth Mint, or you can support us via PayPal. And thank you to everyone who's supported the channel. I've recently had, you may see on the community tab of the YouTube page, I've run out of data. Making 5 videos, or data storage, making 5 videos a day is kind of really blown out my data storage anticipation, so I've had to run out and order another little Synology NAS. So thank you all very much. That's kind of where it's going. Take care, guys. I'll see you next time.